Imagine holding your very first paycheck of the year. Right. But before you can spend a single dime on rent or groceries or yourself, you are required to publicly hand over the very best of it.
Yeah.
And then, stand in front of your entire community to recite your family's deepest historical traumas and struggles. Welcome to the deep dive. It is so wonderful to have you here with us.
It really is.
Before we step into the ancient world to explore why an entire civilization lived exactly like that, I want to offer a divine blessing for your day and for your entire week ahead. May you find clarity, peace, and a profound sense of purpose in whatever challenges you're facing right now.
That intentional pause is, it's exactly the headspace required to approach what we're looking at today. It just demands that we slow down and fundamentally reevaluate our modern assumptions about wealth, ownership and community.
Totally, because today we are reverse engineering an ancient socio-political blueprint. We're looking closely at Deuteronomy chapter 26. And to ensure we aren't just skimming the surface here, we are filtering this text through two incredibly rigorous Portuguese study Bibles, the Holman Study Bible and the NAA, or Nova Almeida Atualizada.
Yeah, both of these sources just excel at reconstructing the psychological and cultural architecture of the ancient Near East.
They really do.
They pull back the curtain on the socioeconomic assumptions an ancient Israelite would have intuitively grasped, which we, thousands of years later, might entirely miss.
Exactly. Our mission is to figure out how these people processed gratitude, how they architected their social safety nets, and really how they defined their intensely unique relationship with the divine.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with what has to be the most massive psychological whiplash in their collective history.
Oh, absolutely. The 40 years of wilderness wandering are over, and they are finally standing on the edge of the Promised Land.
Right.
The Holman study notes really emphasize the economic shock of this transition. For 4 decades, their entire survival strategy was fundamentally passive. Think about it like a child receiving a daily allowance. Except, the allowance is literally food falling from the sky.
The manna.
Right. The manna just appeared every morning. There was no plowing, no irrigating, no stressing over drought or locusts.
A miraculous existence, certainly, but one completely devoid of long-term economic agency or planning. Entering Canaan meant growing up.
Yeah.
It meant moving from daily, passive provision to seasonal, active agriculture.
And the stakes of that shift are terrifying. Suddenly, you are relying on the weather, the soil quality, and your own physical labor to survive. It's a completely different paradigm.
It really is a shock to the system.
And the moment that first harvest comes in, they are hit with this incredibly demanding physical requirement, the ritual of the first fruits. You have to take the absolute very best of the harvest, put it in a basket, and physically bring it to the priest at the chosen place.
What's fascinating here is the timing and the visceral sensory experience of this mandate. The Holman notes point out that this ritual likely aligns with the Festival of First Fruits.
Also known as Pentecost, right?
Exactly, which happened 50 days after Passover. So picture the agricultural reality here.
You've spent months breaking your back in the field, totally terrified of a bad yield. The very first crops are finally ripe.
And your natural human instinct is to hoard that first yield, to secure it for your family
Because you don't know what tomorrow holds.
Exactly. Yet the text demands you take the absolute best of it, place it in a basket, and physically carry it away from your farm, taking it to the priest at the central place of worship.
And as the NIA notes point out, this acts as a sort of psychological circuit breaker. It forces the farmer to acknowledge that the land itself is a free gift.
Right. They didn't earn the dirt or the rain that produced the crop.
They are systematically overriding the human instinct to claim absolute ownership over their labor, but the basket is only half of the ritual. This is the part that fascinates me.
The verbal declaration.
Yes. You don't just drop off the fruit in silence and go back to work. The offerer has to deliver a mandatory, highly specific speech, and it opens with this striking line, "A wandering Aramean was my father."
The NAA study notes provide the historical grounding for that phrase. The wandering Aramean refers to the patriarch Jacob.
Right.
He was essentially a stateless refugee working for his Aramean father-in-law Laban before eventually fleeing down into Egypt as a tiny, vulnerable clan.
But the speech doesn't stop there. Verses 5 through 10 require the farmer to recount the entirety of their enslavement and liberation.
The Holman notes draw a brilliant parallel here, calling this an ancient creed. It functions much like the creeds developed by the early Christian church centuries later.
Wow.
It is a liturgical recounting of history.
The juxtaposition is just wild. You are standing there holding the tangible proof of your current success, this beautiful basket of produce, while verbally confessing your historical lowliness.
Saying things like, we were small.
Yeah, we went to Egypt, we became a great nation, but we were brutalized and oppressed. We cried out to the Lord, and he brought us out with a strong hand, an outstretched arm, and great terror into this land flowing with milk and honey.
Notice the stark contrast with surrounding ancient empires there. Egypt or Babylon would mandate national creeds boasting of their invincibility, their divine descent from warrior gods.
But Israel's foundational narrative is, we were homeless, we were enslaved, and we couldn't save ourselves.
That mandatory remembering anchors their gratitude in historical reality, rather than just a fleeting emotion. It actively prevents the arrogance of self-made wealth.
Imagine having to do that, bringing your very first paycheck of the year to your community center and having to recite your entire family history of struggle and triumph before you could cash it.
It completely transforms the concept of a free gift.
So the first fruits establish that philosophical foundation at the start of the harvest. But, I mean, a single basket of fruit doesn't sustain an entire society for the rest of the year. How did they bridge the gap between a ritual of gratitude and the actual mechanics of keeping people alive year-round?
Well, the text pivots from the symbolic first yield to the systematic management of the larger harvest. It introduces the logistics of the third-year tithe.
Normally, a tithe, which is a tenth of the agricultural yield, would be taken to the central sanctuary. But every third year, the protocol completely flips.
Right, the food doesn't go to the capital.
No, it stays localized. It's stored and distributed right inside their own towns and gates. Here's where it gets really interesting. Who is actually getting this food?
The text explicitly designates a very specific list of recipients. The Levite, the foreigner, often translated as the stranger, the orphan, and the widow.
We hear those categories today, and it just sounds like, standard charity. But looking at the historical context from the Holman notes, this is a shockingly radical economic structure.
Absolutely radical. In the ancient Near East, there was zero government-sponsored social welfare. The state didn't tax citizens to fund programs for the poor. Furthermore, the Levites, the priestly tribe, were uniquely landless. They were intentionally not given territory to farm on a large scale, making them entirely dependent on the religious fidelity of the other tribes.
So the Levites are vulnerable by systemic design. The orphans and widows are vulnerable by tragedy. But the inclusion of the foreigner or the stranger is what really stops me in my tracks.
It should. Mandating that an Israelite citizen surrender 10% of their gross income to ensure a non-citizen immigrant doesn't starve is a breathtaking departure from ancient tribal norms.
It is ancient social security, but it's entirely decentralized. It relies on the individual citizen looking their impoverished neighbor in the eye and handing over the grain.
Yep.
And the Holman notes point out something incredibly profound about the theology behind this. Giving to these marginalized groups is considered giving directly to the Lord himself.
The vertical relationship with the divine is proven by the horizontal relationship with the vulnerable. You cannot logically claim to worship the God who liberated you from Egyptian slavery while simultaneously letting the immigrant or the orphan starve outside your gates. The hypocrisy would be intolerable.
Now, because we are dealing with an ancient text, there are mechanics here that sound completely bizarre to our modern sensibilities.
Oh, for sure.
Like, after distributing this third-year tithe locally, the farmer must make a public declaration of compliance. They have to swear they haven't eaten the tithe while in a state of mourning. They haven't removed it while ceremonially unclean.
And they haven't offered any of it to the dead.
Look, I have to ask, wait, offering food to the dead. Were there ancient Canaanite zombies roaming the countryside that we don't know about?
As entertaining as that visual is, the reality is a bit more sociological. The NAA notes illuminate this beautifully.
Really?
Yeah, they explain that offering to the dead was a ubiquitous pagan practice in the surrounding cultures. Cults of the dead, ancestor worship, leaving provisions at grave sites to appease restless spirits.
Ah, so these were standard operating procedures in the ancient Near East.
Extremely common.
So this isn't just about food safety or hygiene, it's a deliberate boundary marker.
Precisely. It is a rejection of supernatural hedging. An ancient farmer facing a drought might be tempted to honor Yahweh with the tithe, but also quietly leave a little barley at his grandfather's grave.
Just in case the Canaanite ancestor spirits actually had any influence over the rain? hedging their bets to guarantee a good crop.
Exactly. By forcing the farmer to declare, "I have not offered any of this to the dead," the law demands undivided loyalty. The sustenance God provides is explicitly for the living community, to sustain the widow and the orphan, not to be squandered on the dead.
That gives it so much more weight. It's not just a weird ancient superstition. It's about channeling resources to actual living human beings in need.
Yes.
And this section wraps up with the farmer praying. They ask God to look down from his holy habitation in heaven to bless Israel.
The NAA notes highlight an essential theological tension in that specific prayer.
What tension is that?
Well, the farmer acknowledges that while God's manifest presence might reside in the earthly tabernacle down the road, his ultimate habitation is in heaven.
Oh, so it's a dual recognition of his intimate proximity to Israel and his transcendent supreme authority over the entire cosmos.
Exactly. And that dual recognition sets the stage for the climax of the chapter.
Right, because we've tracked the historical gratitude of the first fruits, and we've mapped out the rigorous, localized social security of the third-year tithe.
But the text doesn't end with agricultural logistics.
No, it suddenly pivots into this incredibly intense emotional declaration in verses 16 through 19.
The transition here represents the ultimate purpose of everything we've discussed so far. The tone shifts from procedural to deeply relational.
So what does this all mean? When I read these final verses, it feels like I'm watching two parties finalize a modern contract. They've gone over the terms, the asset distribution, the compliance clauses, and now they are signing on the dotted line. But wait, calling it a contract feels a bit transactional for a religious text, doesn't it? Is God really negotiating terms with mortals here?
That tension is what makes the ancient covenantal structure so profound. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Holman notes use the phrase bilateral character to describe this covenant.
Bilateral character.
Yeah. It is undeniably a mutual agreement, a two-way street, but it is bound by complete devotion rather than mere legal liability.
The NDA notes point back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5 here, the famous command to love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul.
Exactly. The text states, "Today the Lord your God commands you to do these statutes and rules. You shall therefore be careful to do them with all your heart and with all your soul."
It demands internal surrender, not just outward behavioral compliance. You can't just begrudgingly hand over the grain, the posture of the heart matters.
And then we get the actual bilateral exchange. First, the human side. Israel publicly declares that the Lord is their God.
They commit to walking in his ways, keeping his statutes, and obeying his voice.
They're actively opting in to the socio-political blueprint. And in return, on the other side of the covenant, the Lord makes his declaration.
He proclaims that Israel is his special, treasured possession, just as he promised.
It functions more like a marriage vow than a corporate merger.
I love that. I am yours, and you are mine.
That is the exact relational dynamic the text establishes. They are no longer just a loose affiliation of former slaves who survived the desert. They are the treasured possession of the creator of the universe.
Wow.
And that elevated status comes with a massive, world-facing objective.
The NWA notes really lean into the culmination of all these laws. The text states that God will exalt Israel above all the nations he has made in praise, in fame, and in glory.
But we have to ask why. Why fame and glory? Is it just for nationalistic ego?
The very last phrase of the chapter answers that, Brett.
Yes. The exaltation is so that they may function as a holy people dedicated to the Lord.
Meaning their societal health is the marketing campaign for their theology.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. If they actually follow these laws, if they institutionalize gratitude, if they ruthlessly protect the foreigner and the widow,
And if they reject the manipulative pagan practices of their neighbors.
yes, then they will become an undeniable beacon. A civilization so uniquely just and prosperous that it naturally draws the attention of the surrounding world.
They were meant to be the living, breathing proof that a society built on radical generosity to the vulnerable is vastly superior to an empire built on hoarding and power.
Absolutely.
The rituals of the baskets and the local grain silos were just the daily practical mechanisms for keeping that massive, lofty identity grounded in reality.
It challenges everything we assume about how an ancient society was supposed to operate, and frankly, it holds a mirror up to how our modern societies operate today.
It is stunning how this ancient text seamlessly weaves together the deeply spiritual and the intensely practical. We've navigated a lot of complex terrain today, decoding Deuteronomy 26 through the profound insights of the Holman and NWA study Bibles.
We really have.
We've traced the terrifying leap from passive manna to the grueling reality of agriculture. We've seen how a basket of fruit forced an entire society to recite a creed of their own historical trauma and homelessness.
We've also uncovered a decentralized, community-funded Social Security net designed to protect the most vulnerable margins of society.
Even non-citizens.
Right. While systematically rejecting the supernatural paranoia of surrounding cultures.
And it all culminated in that bilateral covenant, a mutual heart and soul vow that tied their vertical relationship with God directly to their horizontal care for their neighbors. Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today.
Okay.
Something to really turn over in your mind as you navigate your week. The ancient Israelites weren't allowed to just internalize their gratitude. Feeling thankful wasn't enough.
They had to act.
Right. They were mandated to act on it by physically surrendering their wealth to the marginalized, and they had to vocalize it by remembering exactly how powerless they used to be. So think about your own trajectory. If you were required to draft a mandatory creed recounting your personal history, a spoken public record of your struggles, the unearned lucky breaks, the specific people who carried you, and the divine providence that placed you exactly where you are sitting right now, what would that creed say?
That's a profound question.
And more importantly, if reciting that creed dictated how you spent your money, your time, and your energy today, how would it reshape your relationship with your community? How would it completely rewrite your definition of your own wealth?
Wow.
It is a heavy, challenging question, but an incredibly beautiful one to sit with. Thank you so much for joining us and trusting us with your time on this deep dive. God blesses all the listeners.